Steve, you've just come back from London where you were involved in a cricket corruption case. Could you tell the audience what you've been doing there?
I can talk about it now because it's public knowledge. 2 months ago, I was asked to do a polygraph test on Steve Waugh as to whether during his cricketing career had ever received any bribes or involved in match fixing or anything like that.
Just for those of any generation who may not know who Steve Waugh is, the Australian cricketer. Right.
So, because in an effort to stamp out corruption, he thought he would lead by example, and he decided to undergo a polygraph test and me ask questions about that. And just for the record, he did pass.
and Steve is the head of the Cricket Corruption Council, isn't he?
Yeah, I was asked to speak at the ICC at Lord's in London, and he heads up the World Cricket Committee, and they're looking at different ways of stamping out corruption.
So Steve passed. Now, did you interview any Pakistani players?
Interestingly enough, no, and I don't think they're that keen on the idea.
And speaking of London, I think most Australians have been riveted by the News Limited case. It's been capturing so many headlines and television reports and so on. Did you watch any of the people giving evidence? And was there anything you gleaned from any of the people you watched, like Rupert Murdoch or the editor, Rebecca, I can't remember his surname now, Rebecca, or David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England?
Yeah. A lot of the time people think that politicians make good lies. They often lie by omission rather than commission. So what people don't tell you is often more important than what they do. The other thing too is a lot of politicians realise that when they're recorded, they can always show those clips back again. So they're very careful. What I found was a lot of evasion, and from all parties actually. But often you've got to think about it, because if you've said something in the past, you don't want to contradict what you've previously said. So they're in a bit of a fine line. So it's better to say less than more, because you're going to trip yourself up.
You mean keep it simple?
Yep.
And what can you tell about the person asking the questions?
Yeah.
Because they were fairly serious, and there was very little expression on the faces of the questioners in the Parliament.
Yeah, look, I often say good interviewers are not just question askers, but they're analysts of human behaviour. Good interviewers not just ask the question, but watch how people respond. I want to see if, when I'm interviewing somebody, my question becomes a threatening stimulus which engages changes in their behaviour, and are they withholding information. Research shows the 3 reasons why people confess to crimes is 1, they like the interviewer, 2, to get it off their chest, and 3, they believe the evidence is so overwhelmingly against them that further resistance is futile. So I've seen many times, I remember when I was a detective, we were interviewing a well-known pedophile, and incidentally, pedophiles make the best liars bar none.
Why do pedophiles
Well, they're very good at manipulating their victims and their treatment providers, and they live a lie, literally. And my partner said, if you don't tell us what you did to this child, we're going to lock you up, you're going to go to jail, you'll never see your wife or children again. Just gave him 1,000 reasons why not to confess, not one reason why he should or could. So often, I think the interviewer makes a huge difference. If your questions are not clear and concise, it allows a deceptive person room to wriggle through.
Are people born bad, or does the environment have something to do with it?
Yeah, look, the study of psychopathy, the word psychopath is one of the most misunderstood words in the English language. People think that psychopaths go out and kill people. Well, I can tell you, everyone in this audience at some stage has worked with a psychopath. Doesn't mean they go out and kill people. It means that if I'm going to...
Any particular generation?
No, it's across generations. But typically, they show no empathy. So that means if I have to step on you to get to the position, I'll do it. So they're recklessly indifferent to the pain, suffering, physical and emotional harm they cause. They just don't care. One of the interesting things, I had dinner one night with a woman called Mary Ellen O'Toole, who used to be in charge of the FBI profiling unit. And one of her concerns was a lot of interviewers, FBI agents, will ask questions like this of a clinically diagnosed sociopath or psychopath, serial killer. Look, if you don't want to help us solve this crime, think of the pain and the suffering and the anguish the victims' families are going through. The problem with that is you're not appealing to the right emotion. If you watch the Jeffrey Dahmer interview, which I have, one of the detectives says, how is it that you were so much smarter than the police. And all of a sudden, he starts smiling and out it comes. So he was appealing to another emotion, which is ego. So good interviewers are not just good at reading, but asking the right questions and analysing behaviour thereafter.
Avril, you've written 3 books and co-authored another that deal with leadership, primarily leadership issues, and I think in Australia at the moment we lack leadership of all political persuasions. You know,
Yes.
what is it that, in your opinion, makes a good leader, and in particular, what is it that Australians are looking for in their political leaders?
I won't go through the 9 characteristics that we identified, but what I will say, in the top 3 characteristics of effective leaders is open and honest communication, including good listening skills. And as I said in my talk, 75% of the youngest generation in the workplace says, you know, no one listens to me, so what's the point of speaking up? And if I look at what's happening in Australian politics at the moment, and just being objective, with both the carbon tax and with Tony Abbott's, you know, rebuttal of everything Julia Gillard says, neither of them are listening to the public. And I think that's what people are most upset about, is they're not listening to the public. And interestingly, the other thing that features in the 9 characteristics of effective leaders is their ability to give feedback on both poor performance and accept it, but also their ability to give feedback on positive behavioural performance. And Australian managers actually rank in the bottom 10% in the world for giving feedback both on poor performance, because quote unquote we don't want to upset people, and we don't give feedback on good performance because of the tall poppy syndrome. And line managers actually say to me when I say, do you tell people they've done a good job? They go, mate, they'd get up themselves. And I go, oh, so we don't want people to feel good about themselves at work, but equally we're not going to tell them when they're doing a bad job. So in a nutshell, it's about open and honest communication and ability to listen and to give good, regular feedback. Even if you just get those 3 things right, you're well on your way to being a good leader.
You mentioned management. I think it's fair to say that many surveys show that in Australia, management is not of a particularly high level. We're often criticised for our bad management skills. Where do we fail? I mean, certainly you say we don't listen enough. That's one aspect of it. We don't give praise enough. But there's more to being a manager or a good leader or a good manager than just those 2 particular skills.
Well, there's 2 other areas in which we fail. One is our lack of willingness to change traditional leadership and management models, which currently are paternalistic and command and control, to more collaborative, inclusive styles of leading. And I got very excited last year when Harvard Business School released a study which actually showed that organisations which created a culture of collaboration, teamwork, and developed inclusive leaders as part of their leadership and management development were 250% more productive and therefore more profitable than organisations which created cultures of internal competition. So in that space, it's about not wanting to change the way we manage and lead people. And last but not least, older managers, and these days I'm very careful about my definition of older, but supposedly older is, you know, over 45, which I still think is very young. But older managers still believe they have to have all the answers. And my key message from that point of view is you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be honest about what you do know and what you don't know, and then empower others within your team to find the answers.
So you said paternalistic. Now it's interesting. I did an AIM great debate recently, and one of the team members from the other side was Malcolm Turnbull, and the topic was, do we need quotas for women to get into the boardroom? And that was what we were discussing. And Malcolm said that he felt that the workplace was still geared for men who had wives.
Absolutely.
So, and then I wouldn't want any men in this room to think that we're male bashing, because that's not the point, and we're not. But it seems to me, if you mention change and paternalistic ways of doing things, that perhaps we just need to fundamentally change the entire workplace. You know,
Yes.
But where does the leadership to do that come from?
Well, the challenge is, if you look at the ASX 200,
I do, and it's very sad.
Well, and by training, I can't help myself because I'm an accountant and economist by training. 91.3%, to be precise, of board members are male, Anglo-Saxon, average age in their 60s, which makes them veterans. So one generation, one gender,
I think I'm with Wendy
and
there.
one
I think the
cohort.
term veteran is a bit offensive.
Wise elder tribal leaders, but
That's
you'd
very
have to
nice.
question whether the people reappointing new board members are wise when what they do is appoint people who are just like them. And I could say pale, male and stale, but that might be rude.
Well, I remember when there was a bloke came out to lead Westpac from America,
Bob Joss.
Bob Josh,
Yes.
and I think he said, where are the women, where are the Asians, where are the Indigenous people? He made the point. He too made the point that he was struck by how white and Anglo-Saxon our boardrooms were. We haven't really progressed.
Yeah.
That was the 80s.
The challenge is that if you look at graduate statistics, 56% of university graduates today in all disciplines except computer science and engineering are now women. And if you look at Generation X and Y women, and the Gen X and the Gen Y men in the room know this, they are not cooking for the men, they are not doing their laundry. Most Gen X and Gen Y men have found a laundromat that'll do 5 shirts for $10 because there's no Gen X or Gen Y woman doing it for them. They have to do half the drop-offs to daycare and half the pickups, and they're responsible for half the meals during the week. And if you say, I don't cook, the response you'll get from a Gen X or Gen Y woman is, mate, get a takeaway because I don't care, it's your turn. So my point is that the workplace is shifting and more than half our educated workforce now are women. And I didn't believe in quotas. For many, many years, I believed, like all women, we want to be promoted on the basis of merit. But if you look at the fact that the Sex Discrimination Act was introduced in 1984, that's nearly 30 years ago, and we've only increased the participation of women on boards in that same period by 1.1%. And at the current rate of change, it'll take 177 years before we have equal representation of men and women on the ASX 200. I think we need to now actually say to organisations, show us in your annual report and as part of your annual process, what are you actually doing, not only to promote women, but what are you doing to promote young people? Because I think we need more young people on boards who understand technology and people from cultural backgrounds, because I believe that diversity brings creativity and innovation. Uniformity brings more of the same. And as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Steve, back to you for one tick. Have you ever told a lie?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think we all lie. The problem is, in life, I mean, we lie for a number of reasons, like I said before. And could you imagine going to work tomorrow and telling your boss what you really thought or what you really felt about them? You would get in so much trouble. So we've got to a stage now where we're just evasive. And Bill Clinton said during giving his evidence in relation to...
The reason I asked you that question was I can't help but think if you took Steve to a party, you'd be able to tell me so much about the people in the room. And then other people might be a bit nervous around you.
I do get that. I must admit, in my early days, when I first started, I would listen to something and then I would actually confront that person. But then I realised that's a bad move. So now I just let it go to the keeper, because often, I mean, when you consider human beings, we just things like meeting somebody, we lie about, you know, potential partners or to meet a potential partner. An example I like to use, a good friend of mine, one day we go out and he says, Steve, you've got to come with us because you're really good at reading when women are interested. And I said, okay, after all this training, that's all I'm good for. But we go to a nightclub. And what had happened was, we're looking around, I said, all right, what I want you to do is just have a look around the room and just have a look at the interaction between people. There was a couple sitting eating, and I said, what can you tell me about that couple eating? And he says, they're eating. I said, no, that's obvious, other than that. And he says, well, I don't know. I said, I can tell you they're married. he goes, how can you tell that? I said, because they're more interested in eating than talking. And I said, have a look at the group next to them. Now, they were all over each other, touching, kissing, groping, and all the rest of it. I said, what can you tell me about the relationship between those two? And he said, well... I said, what can you tell me? And he says, well, they're all over each other. I said, no, I'll tell you what I can tell you. They're married to other people. And then we look around, and I found this quite interesting. I'm fascinated, like I said, what makes people tick. What's the psychology behind why do people go out and kill people, and why are there good marketing and salespeople that can sell something to anyone? And I was watching, and just getting back to what I was saying about how females, when they're interested, they'll exhibit certain behavioural cues. And what had happened was, I was watching, and Brendan, a very good close friend of mine, said to me, he said, have a look at that girl over there, and she was near the bar, and I said, look, go up and say hello to her because she's keen. And he goes, how can you tell? I said, well, she's engaging in what we call preening gestures. So I don't know if you know the difference between a grooming gesture and a preening gesture. A grooming gesture is what a couple of the ladies at my table were doing when they first sat down. They'd be doing things like pulling the hair out of the fringe out of the eyes, or that sort of stuff. Now, say, for example, I'm a female and I see a male on the other side of the room. Now, I'm not a female, so I don't do this really well. But I would engage in preening gestures, and it'd be something like this. It's a lot of self-touching. So I said, go over, say hello, don't talk about yourself, ask open questions, don't tell her where you work, what sort of car you drive or where you live, but just ask her questions. And anyway, so I was watching, and then he goes up and he talks to her for about, I'd estimate about 14 seconds. Turns around and comes back, and he says, I thought you were meant to be an expert in body language and understanding people. I said, what happened? He said, she wasn't interested at all. What had happened was she was interested in the guy that was next to me. So I got all the behavioural cues right, I just selected the wrong person.
Thank you very much, Steve and Avril. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you've learned a lot of things today you didn't know before. So use all you've learned wisely, and good luck. And please thank Steve Van Aperen and Avril Henry.